And then afterwards we have a shofar horn blower here. So the 5 reasons, and there are many more. There are actually about 14, but it'll be too long to go through. But 5 that I saw was in the Old Testament. And the first one is that the first reason was God was using the shofar to gather God's people at Mount Sinai. It's found in Exodus 19, verse 13 to 16. When it says, when the trumpet sounds long, they shall come near the mountain. In verse 16, then it came to pass on the 3rd day, in the morning, that there were thundering and lightning, and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the trumpet was very loud, long blasts from the ram's horn, and all the people trembled. Moses led them out from the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. So the blast of the shofar, also known as the trump of God, this sound brought great fear and reverence. When God came down from Sinai to establish his covenant with his people, the sound of the shofar, when it is sounded today, as a believer in Yeshua, as in Jesus, it reminds us of the new covenant that he has established with all the peoples of the earth. And we can come to him with a reverence, a renewed sense of godly fear. The second reason that the shofar was sounded in the Old Testament was to proclaim liberty in the year of Jubilee. This is the sound of celebration. It's found in the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verses 9 to 10. Then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, and the day of atonement you shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all the land. And you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all their land to all of its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. You know, just as the shofar was a signal of God's gathering his people to himself when he came down from Mount Sinai to establish his covenant with his people, so the same sound announced at the close of the great day of atonement on Yom Kippur, after the evening sacrifice, the year which restored to the people the freedom and the blessings of the covenant. So today, the sound of the shofar reminds us of the liberty we have received in Yeshua, in Jesus. He has established that new covenant with us, and we receive liberty. It is our Jubilee, and we receive the total forgiveness of all debts of sin. And now we are heirs of the blessing of that covenant. The third reason that the shofar was sounded in the Old Testament was that to break down walls, to bring the feet of the enemies. Most people here will know the story of the marching around Jericho and the blowing of the ram's horn, and finally the walls came down. Let's look at it in Joshua chapter 6, verse 2 and 5. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go around the city once. This shall you do 6 days, and 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow the shofar. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him." In verse 20, it is recorded, "So the people shouted when the priests blew the shofar. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the shofar, and the people shouted with a great shout that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. You know, when the shofar were blown, the people shouted and the walls fall down, and their enemies scattered, they were defeated. But we should think about that today. When we blow that shofar, and we make that sound, that's the sound of Jubilee. And all of our people, we can begin to shout for victory. That every wall that Satan has put up, and every wall that other people have put up and built around us, they will come crumbling down to the ground. And the enemies will be defeated. The fourth reason that the shofar was blown in the Old Testament was to celebrate the Ark of the Covenant. 2 Samuel 6:15, it says, "So David, and all the house of Israel brought up the Ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the shofar." David and all the nations of Israel brought up the Ark of the Lord with jubilee and the blowing of the shofar. This expressed the sound of jubilee and the joyous shouting of the people. You know, the Ark of the Covenant represents the presence of God and always brought the blessing of the covenant to God's people. When the shofar is blown, we can rejoice and shout and celebrate, just like David did, for the presence of God has been established in us. This is where the Ark of the Presence is, in us. And when we shout and we praise, and we then are recipients of the blessing of the new covenant established through Jesus. Now the fifth reason to why to blow the shofar is to rally the people together for war. Jeremiah 4:5, it says, "Declare it in Judah and proclaim in Jerusalem and say, blow the trumpet in the land. Cry, gather together, and say, assemble yourself, and let us go into the fortified city." Jeremiah 6:1 says, "O children of Benjamin, gather yourself to flee the midst of Jerusalem. Blow the shofar, blow the trumpet in Jekoil, and set up a signal fire in Beth Kesharim." So in 1 Samuel 13, 3rd and 4th verses says this, "And Jonathan attacked the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the shofar, and throughout all the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. Now all Israel heard it, and said that Saul had attacked the garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel had also become an abomination to the Philistines. And the people were called together to Saul at Gilgal." Now you know that Saul blew the shofar throughout the land and proclaimed liberty from the oppression of the Philistines. So we can also proclaim liberty from our enemies and the oppression that the devil puts on all the people's lives. And he rallied the people together and to fight and bring about the defeat of the enemies. Now this was how it was done. The first blast was blown in the near places, and a signal fire was lit. And then a second blast was blown, and then answered in a more distant locality was another signal fire. And this is the way the proclamation was sent quickly throughout the whole country, to call the people together to fight. So now we need to sound the shofar. It calls us to rally together and to break the oppression which the devil tries to bring upon us. And we will not tolerate, we should not tolerate it. We will not tolerate the spiritual oppression any longer. We will fight in the Spirit. We will secure our liberty that has already been given to us in Jesus at the cross. We will allow the all-consuming fire to ignite in our lives and draw our people together to serve God. You see, God wants to make the sound of the shofar to rally the people together. And then he wants to ignite a fire, a signal fire, signaling that the fire of God is here. It is there. It is there.